Welcome, everyone. It's about 2 after the top of the hour, so we're gonna jump right on into this and get started, so we have the most time to spend on Q&A. My name is Becky Sherman. I'm a program officer with the NSF Regional Innovation Engines Program. We want to thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to spend some time answering your questions. Yeah, great, advance the slide. So today I'm going to give a very brief overview of the Engines program, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So these slides may look familiar to a lot of you. You've probably seen them in our webinars or roadshows, but for those of you who may have not had a chance to see any of these slides, we're going to go through this quickly. So if you're not familiar with NSF, we have a $8.5 billion roughly annual budget to fund predominantly basic and foundational research. 94% of those dollars go out the door to fund educational and research related activities, and approximately 200 million are spent on public-private partnerships. Next slide. So in March of this year, NSF launched the new Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate. This directorate's a little bit different than the others at NSF. Traditionally, NSF directorates are really built around a discipline. TIP, as we refer to it, really cuts across all of the agencies, directorates, and offices, and is designed to support emerging technologies and accelerate the translation of research results from lab to market. The goal of TIP is really to improve U.S. competitiveness and to train a diverse workforce for future, future high-paying jobs. So the NSF Engines Program, the goal of this program is to catalyze and accelerate regional scale R&D based innovation ecosystems throughout the US. Engines will advance critical technologies, address societal challenges, and promote job creation and economic growth. The NSF is planning to fund Engines with up to $160 million for up to 10 years. And as smaller planning grants, if you will, those teams not ready to launch an engine can apply for $1 million for up to 2 years to develop an engine. And of course, deadlines for concept outlines, as I'm sure you are all well aware, are due on June 30th. Next slide. So what is an engine? We envision an engine to be a multi-sector coalition of regional partners that work together to catalyze regional innovation ecosystems in a topic area of both regional relevance and national significance. Engines are led by CEOs and have a diverse group of partners representing industry, institutions of higher ed, government, nonprofits, and community-led organizations. So if you haven't seen this graphic yet, imagine this represents the engine. It is situated within its regional innovation ecosystem, and as the engine matures, so will the regional innovation ecosystem. So over the 10 years, we'll see this growth of the ecosystem. Next slide. So of course, we have two different types of proposals. Those planning grants, the 1-year awards, are really meant for ecosystems that are still in its developmental phase, where you're still looking to find and nurture initial partnerships, for example. The larger type 2 awards are designed to help ecosystems that are already in the nascent or emergent phases mature and grow over those 10 years of funding so that they can progress from a nascent or emergent ecosystem to that mature ecosystem. And of course, if you look to the BAA, you'll see a lot more information about each of these different phases and how NSF thinks about them. We've identified several characteristics of an NSF engine. So we see these engines supporting R&D innovation to achieve regional economic growth. This will happen through the development of robust regional partnerships and a focus on use-inspired R&D, the translation of innovation to practice, and building a comprehensive workforce. We want to see engines establish these innovation ecosystems that will thrive for decades to come. So we see, financial stability as being a central part to an engine, as well as the development of a culture of innovation, the culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as being central to an engine, and DEIA really should be built throughout the entire engine, right? It's not sort of an add-on to a proposal, for example. And of course, ultimately, we want to see community wealth building within the ecosystem. And then to create a flexible engine, there are details around the structure and accountability mechanisms for an engine. This includes things like leadership, governance, etc. The BAA outlines all of that as well. In terms of eligibility to submit proposals, organizations eligible to submit as a lead or receive a subaward. So either or here would be your institutions of higher ed, US-based nonprofit, non-academic organizations, and for-profit organizations. Additional organizations that can receive subawards, even though they can't be a lead, would be US federally funded research and development centers, US national labs, and US state, local, and tribal governments. Those local governments are going to be limited to agencies or offices specifically dedicated to innovation, economic and or workforce development. And of course, there are a host of other organizations that are not eligible. So for an engine structure, you've probably seen this slide before, but we were trying to give you some examples of how you can structure an engine. So for example, and here you see a consortium of colleges serving as an engine lead, community college, a workforce nonprofit organization, philanthropic, and some VCs as core partners, with local government, state government, and university as additional partners. And you can imagine that you could sort of shuffle those around in lots of different combinations, a few that we've illustrated here, depending on what works best for your proposal, your region, and your partners. So simply to demonstrate that there is a lot of potential variability here, right? These are not meant to be prescriptive. Next slide. Okay, so what's next? Build your team. Hopefully you've already given this some thought. As I mentioned, concept outlines are due on June 30th, so in a very short time. And then of course we will publish the accepted concept outlines so that everyone will be able to see who's interested in submitting a proposal. And then on August 1st, folks who submitted and had a concept outline accepted will be able to attend Proposers Day. And type 1 proposals are due at the end of September, and letters of intent and type 2 proposals will be, due dates will be announced at a later date. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Daniel. He's going to start us off with a Mythbusters session before we jump into your specific questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Becky. So before we get into your specific questions, I want to bring up a couple of things that have come up repeatedly. And sometimes people say, oh, I didn't know that. Or I was hoping you all could say that out loud because people from my region don't seem to fully believe it. So we're going to do a little game where I'm going to ask the question and then a poll is going to pop up and you vote if the statement is true or false. But before we do that, I'm going to just walk you through a couple of things. Mythbusters is cover everything from regions of service, review committee structure, the CEO role, type 1 versus type 2, lead applicants, and then we have a miscellaneous section. So this will be quick, but it will be even quicker if everyone actively participates in the polls. So First thing, region of service. There's a lot of dots on this map. Are these dots the places that you all care about? The answer is no. This is just representative of our desire to invest in regions all across the country. 2, you all did 5 road shows. Does that mean that you're going to make 5 regions out of those 5 road shows and award 1 type 2 in each region? No, those were just our attempt to split up the country so that we didn't have 1,000 people at each event. Do not view those road shows as being representative of how we define regions or anything else. 3, does my region of service need to cross state lines to be competitive? I heard it needs to be at least 2 states, if not more. No, that is not correct. It is up to you all to determine what your region of service looks like. It is possible that it crosses state lines because there's a regional asset or anchor institution that multiple states draw on, or there's natural points for coordination and partnership, but it also can be a single state, or it can be even a region within a state. I don't want people to get caught up on some of these things about what is needed. Basically, we want you to put forward the region that you think will be the most competitive, and you have an opportunity to lead an engine and build kind of a compelling narrative around that engine over a 10-year period. So this is kind of our starting point for the region of service. Now we're going to get into the interactive part. First thing, I hear that the review committee will be composed exclusively of academic reviewers, and that you all say that you care about translation, economic growth, workforce development, but really the quality of proposed research is all that matters. The whole review committee will be academic reviewers. So Juliana, this is question 1. Can you launch this? Is this a true or false statement? So you should see a poll popping up here in a moment. All right, Juliana, do we want to share the results here? So it looks like you all overwhelmingly got the answer correct. The answer is false. This is not how we are thinking about this. We are going to have reviewers from multiple sectors, from the venture capital community, from the economic development community, from academia, and many others, so that we have kind of a full diversity of perspectives here. Next question. The CEO for NSF Engines, which is specifically talking about the Type 2 awards. I understand that NSF Engines say they want a full-time CEO, but I can do it as a PI and keep teaching and doing my research and other things because the CEO really isn't a full-time role. Let's launch poll number 2. Do we think that a CEO is a part-time or a full-time role? All right, let's end this poll. So yes, it looks like folks got it right again. It is a full-time role, and that is very important to us. And also, this role can be filled from someone in academia, but it does not need to be someone from academia. We are looking for someone with a cross-sector perspective, perhaps an investment, an industry, startup, or even an economic development background. But the ability to speak multiple languages and across sectors is really important for the CEO. And this is also a management role, in addition to understanding and working deeply on some of the research components of the topic area. All right, type 1s versus type 2s. If I submit a type 1 and a type 2 application for the same region and topic area, I will increase my odds of success. NSF will help make those decisions for me. Is this true or false? Whoop. Sorry, I think I gave you the answer accidentally here. But let's see if we continue to get it right from an audience perspective. The question is, if you submit a type 1 and type 2 concept outline, you will increase your odds of success. All right, can we share the results here? Great, yes, it is false. There is no advantage in doing that. But this is kind of an important thing. We cleared this up in the last FAQ, and I want to reinforce. You can submit a type 2 concept outline and then switch to a type 1 proposal. This is true. You can't submit a type 1 concept paper and then a type 2 proposal for this round. You'd be able to submit a future type 2 when we have another call for proposals, but you can go from a type 2 concept outline to a type 1 proposal. You can't go in the opposite direction. And if there are additional questions about that, we can clarify that during the Q&A. Lead organization. This is a good question. Folks say, anybody can be a lead organization, but only university-led proposals will be successful since they know NSF and the NSF processes best. So while we say, for-profits, nonprofits, and institutions of higher education are eligible, what we're really saying is only university-led proposals will be successful. Is that true or false? All right, do you want to share the results here? Great, 95%. This one I think had a bit higher of the true response than some of the others. But we mean it when we said that we intentionally expanded the eligibility of lead organizations. This doesn't mean that a university cannot lead. They are absolutely welcome to lead, but there are also many other types of organizations that are eligible to lead, and regions should think intentionally about what is the institution that is best able to lead their region and achieve the goals of an NSF engine. So we're almost done. We're in the home stretch here. So submitting multiple concept outlines. I know a number of institutions have been thinking about submitting multiple concept outlines, and perhaps, NSF will down select in this first concept outlines phase and, help make the decision so the region themselves don't have to kind of settle on their own topic area or coalesce around an idea. Perhaps this concept outline process will help make some of those tough choices. Do you all think that we are going to make the tough regional choices at this concept outline stage in the process? Can we launch the poll here? All right, the numbers are looking a little different this time. Juliana, do you want to share it? So 85% think that's false. 16% think that's true. So 84-16 is the split. And the correct answer is false. We will not be down selecting for the regions in this concept outline phase. Submitters should not submit multiple concept outlines with the intention that NSF will decide which is the strongest idea. To be clear, we're going to review these concept outlines on their merits and make sure they fit into the criteria outlined in the BAA. However, we're not going to be making judgment calls as to which concept outlines that meet the criteria are better or worse. So at the end of the day, regions are still going to have to make these tough choices between now and the letter of interest and submission stage in the late summer and fall. So it's up to you all how many concept outlines you want to submit, but we're not going to kind of provide additional clarity assuming the application meets our criteria. This might be another topic that there's some desire to go into greater detail during the Q&A. NSF engines equal larger research centers. NSF engines are just larger scale versions of traditional NSF funded research centers and should be viewed the same way. Do we think that is correct? Let's launch the poll. All right, let's share this poll. This one might have been written in a bit of a leading way because it looks like 98% of people understand that this is different than perhaps some of the other research centers that we've launched at NSF in the past. So one of the big differences is there's a regional focus here. We are focused on a regional innovation ecosystem. We are focused on building technology innovation, economic growth, workforce development, and also the culture around these NSF engines perhaps is slightly different than some of the larger research centers at the institution. So while these are not necessarily university centric, they are regional centric, they can be well aligned with some of the things that an IUCRC or an ERC are doing. They could also be integral partners to the success of an engine. So while they are not kind of a research center and you add a couple zeros, there are opportunities to align it with other things that NSF and even other agencies are doing within your region. Last question. I come from a well-resourced region with a thriving innovation ecosystem. Am I excluded from participating in an NSF engine? Let's launch the poll. All right, do you want to share the results? All right, vast majority of people think it is false. that you're not excluded? So the answer is false. While we have a focus on US regions with nascent and emerging innovation ecosystems, regions that have not fully participated in the tech boom of past decades, that part is correct, but no region of the country is excluded. Any region can come forward with their application. We're thinking about it from your regional assets and your topic area maturity. And don't think about this in a binary way, whether I'm a lead organization or I'm not involved at all. There's a lot of ways to be engaged, even if you are based in a more mature ecosystem and your topic area is more mature in that ecosystem. A number of ways to contribute as a core partner to less mature regions, to partner on a number of different initiatives. So think creatively, even if you are in what you might think is a region that is far too mature for this program. There's a number of ways to engage. And if you are unclear about if your region is at the right stage of maturity, I'd refer you to the appendix and also encourage you to have that conversation with us during the Q&A and beyond. So with that, I am going to stop. I appreciate you all taking the time to play Mythbusters with us, and now we'll dig into your Q&A questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Give us just a second here to get set up for the Q&A. And please post your questions using the Q&A function on Zoom, and we are going to try our best to get to as many of them as we can. All right, to get us started, I'm going to ask Jeffrey the first question. Jeffrey, does the PI submitting a concept outline need to be the same as the one submitting the LOI and proposal? We're wondering if the lead person can change, given that a lot is up in the air before the LOI deadline.
Well, the answer is a lot can change. So the submitter of the concept outline does not have to be the submitter of the LOI or the proposal. We fully expect some movement to occur there. What will happen is, if the concept outline is accepted, you'll get an email confirming that acceptance and that you will be submitting that with your proposal.
Awesome, thank you. Dimitri, the next question is for you, which is, the BA notes that PIs should be high-ranking officials at their organizations. Does this mean that the PI should be a VPR, provost, VP, etc., if it's from a university, or can a faculty member be a PI? Thanks.
Sure, thanks, Juliana. Yeah, so the BAA actually states that the CEO should be a senior member of the organization. And so to answer this question, yes, it could be a VPR, could be a provost, but it also could be a senior faculty member as well. At most universities, the tenured faculty members are considered senior personnel at the university. And so, yes, a faculty member could serve as the CEO, but keep in mind that the requirement that this is a full-time position, meaning that it's not like traditional NSF proposals where a faculty member could allot 2 summer months or so and then continue his or her other activities. In this case, the CEO has to be a full-time position, but it could be led by a faculty member, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Becky, the next question is for you, which is, can you give examples of acceptable topic areas?
Okay, so the BAA intentionally doesn't include example topics. So I'm not gonna pose potential topics. We give some very general topics in the webinar slide, so you could also look there. But what I will say is that you want to think about your topic as it relates to the assets of your region and the size of your region, right? And whether or not the topic is at the appropriate scale to leverage $160 million to establish that innovation ecosystem.
Great, thank you. Dimitri, the next question is for you, which is, when are proposal submitters supposed to come to DC for the convening event?
Come to DC. So the convening event, the proposers day, will be on August 1st, but it will be virtual. So there is no convening event for proposers no in-person convening event for proposers or folks that have accepted approved concept outlines. So folks will receive additional information about Proposers Day after decisions are made about the concept outlines. But it's a virtual event.
Great, thank you. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is, we heard you were interested in expanding on where NSF already funds R&D. This seems to be somewhat in conflict with broad community involvement, unless you mean only the portion of the community around research institutions. Is the effort limited to only those in areas around already funded NSF work?
No, I mean, you can build on any regional assets. We think it's important that there is a use-inspired research component. That is one of our 3 key pillars of this initiative, but that does not necessarily need to coincide with the location of universities that are receiving NSF research funding. We think about this in kind of a more inclusive economic growth perspective. And that could be around a university, around multiple universities, or it can be around a different anchor institution that is creating this hub for economic activity and growth.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask 2 questions at the same time. The first one is to Michal and the second one is to Jeffrey. The first one is, and I think Jeffrey, you touched on this earlier, Michal, if you could clarify, can organizations that submit the concept outline not be the lead for the letter of intent and proposal? For example, be listed in the concept outline and then only one of those be a lead on the LOI or proposal. And then second question, which also has to do with concept outlines, is what is the schedule and processing for publishing the concept outlines?
So if the organization that is the lead needs to be part of a concept outline, but does not need to be the one that submitted. For the LOI, it needs to be, the lead needs to be the same person or the same organization submitting LOI as the full proposal.
Awesome. And Jeffrey, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. The concept outlines, our goal is to publish the ones that are approved prior to the Proposers Day in August. These are not the proposal, not the concept outlines as submitted, but summaries generated internally as we're doing the review process. As you might imagine, we have a lot to do in July, and so I wouldn't promise anything, any date prior to, except prior to the Proposers Day.
And Jeffrey, can you address, will all concept outlines be published? Or only those
thank you.
that are...
Yeah, only the ones that are approved. We're not going to publish the ones that we decline.
Great, thank you. And on the note of declining, Dimitri, if NSF discourages a team from submitting based on their concept outline, does that preclude them from going on to participate in a larger team later?
Okay, no, so absolutely not. So NSF could decline a concept outline because it doesn't meet all the criteria that's outlined in the BAA. But we do intend to provide feedback, and it may be that that organization is strong in a given area, and they should very well seek to partner with others within their region to become part of a full engine team. So no, a reject by NSF or decline by NSF at the concept outline stage does not prevent the organization from pursuing partnerships in the larger, as a member of a larger team.
Okay, great. Becky, on the note of concept outlines, which I imagine there are going to be many questions about today, the intent of publicizing the submissions appears to be to facilitate teams aggregating themselves into bigger, more comprehensive efforts. Does that imply that teams which are prepared to offer a partial contribution but cannot address all points are still encouraged to submit, or does NSF prefer to only receive outlines that will address all requested criteria?
So that's a good question. So the way I would answer that question, I would encourage teams to address the guidelines outlined for the concept outlines. And it really is up to your team to decide whether or not you can put together a complete concept outline and submit it to us. Remember that we are publishing concept outlines, right? So if as you're looking at sort of the guidelines for your concept outline. If you don't feel like you quite have what you need to complete a concept outline, and you choose not to complete a concept outline, then I would encourage you to pay close attention to the concept outlines that do get published so that you can reach out to other folks once they become public.
Awesome, thank you. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is NSF planning to play a role in facilitating team mergers between the submission of the concept outlines and the deadline for submitting full proposals?
We are planning on putting the data out there and then creating hopefully a platform for people to reach out to each other and continue those conversations. So we're not going to say you all are both from the same region working on X topic, you need to work together, but we're going to put the data out there and we're hopefully going to make it as easy as possible for you all to have conversations with each other and then decide what is the strongest path forward for your region in that topic area. So are we going to force mergers and acquisitions? No, we are not, but we are going to try to make it as easy as possible for you to team with others who might strengthen your application by going at it together as opposed to going at it alone.
Great, thank you for that. Dimitri, the next question is for you, which is, I'm at a research university and we're making an effort to bring on board a number of different stakeholders, including both large public companies and small businesses, as small as 10 employees. Obviously, these companies are quite different in what they can contribute and how they might benefit. Does NSF have advice on how to bring on core partners, as core partners companies of very different sizes and scopes?
Okay. So yeah, so if in fact you want to bring in for-profit companies, as you mentioned, with perhaps different motivations, different expectations, I think it'll be important for the leadership to really understand what those motivations are and kind of align them where possible. So many of the large companies actually benefit from interacting with smaller companies that perhaps are more agile. So one thing is I would suggest is that you try to understand how both groups' interaction within the engine could be beneficial to each other. But then the larger question is, defining the strategy for your engine and how the larger corporations will contribute and how the engine itself might be beneficial to startups or small companies. And so the short answer is just understand the strategy for your region and understand how you can align the interests of your stakeholders and partners so they can see themselves as really trusted partners and not competition per se. And so generally when we're talking about partnerships of various size companies or even potential competitors, you want to think about how you can align their interests and how the engine itself could benefit each group. I hope that's, if I understand the question, I think that's what they're asking.
Yes, thank you for that answer. And I think there will be other questions later on that are kind of in the same vein. Becky, the next question is for you, which is, can we get a copy of these slides? And if so, where do we find them?
So I will point you to the copy of the original webinar. So the slides that you saw today, minus the Mythbuster slides, are all taken from that original webinar, and that is available on our NSF website. So you can go there to find more information about the program.
Great. Jeffrey, the next question is for you, which is, does this TIP engine goal mean that that it does not support new use-inspired science research, but instead is meant to fund such advanced critical science and technologies that are already ready for commercialization? I'm not sure what the it is referring to, but if you could address kind of use-inspired research and commercialization, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, keep in mind that use-inspired research and translation of research to practice are two equally important goals. So if you're talking about doing only research where the prospects for translation to practice are in the far future, that's probably not the best way to spend the bulk of the research funds that might come from this. Obviously, in any kind of research endeavor, there's sort of a portfolio of farther out things and nearer term things, but it actually, absolutely, the program does not preclude new kinds of research, but it does need to be with a goal towards translation to practice at some time in the reasonable future.
Yeah, Juliana, can I add to that question as well?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I concur with Jeffrey, and we also would encourage that, you know, there are a number of existing NSF programs and other programs funded opportunities for basic research and other types of research. So we encourage the engines to and any of their partners to pursue those existing efforts to carry out basic research and related research and really use the engine funds to leverage catalyzing their innovation ecosystem. And so obviously we support basic research and other types of research, but we really also want you to pursue existing opportunities, you know, to fully maximize the impact of the engine.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Daniel, which is, Daniel, can you discuss who will be involved in the review process?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I just wanted to clarify something that I said in the Mythbusters session. So what we're saying is the reviewers are going to be a mix of folks from different sectors. So it's absolutely going to include people with academic background, academic reviewers who can review the science, can review the research, can review a number of different components of it. But what I was saying is we also are going to have reviewers from different sectors. We're going to have people with workforce development expertise. We're going to have people with translation and venture experience to look at kind of the startup impact and potential of some of the technologies. We're also going to have people who can kind of take a regional economic growth view. So while we're absolutely going to continue to use the merit review process that NSF has excelled at, what I was just kind of saying, and I wanted to clarify, is there's going to be kind of a wide swath of individuals around the table as a part of our review process.
Great, thank you. And on a similar note, Daniel, if I can just throw it back to you to, I think this was another one of your Mythbusters, if you can just clarify again, which is, should a level 2 engine CEO be full-time on this effort?
Yes, it is a full-time role to be the CEO.
Great, thank you. Michal, can the lead organization for a concept outline submit separate concept outlines for type 1 and type 2 projects for the same region and a similar project, where type 2 would be a more mature ecosystem? I think I got that question right, but if you could address that kind of difference between type 1 and type 2, that'd be great.
Sure. So, so in theory, yes, you could do that. We're not going to be monitoring that, but it's really not going to provide any advantage to you. So I'm going to stress again something that was brought up in the introduction, which is that you are, and we've mentioned this for the last couple of weeks, that if you are allowed to submit a type 2 concept outline, but then later on, if you realize that you are better suited to submit a type 1 proposal, then your team can do that instead. So we would encourage you to choose one or the other based on the maturity of your ecosystem. And if you think that you are more in a more mature ecosystem, then you could go for the type 2 and then submit a type 1 if you find out that you need to do that later on.
Okay, great. Dimitri, the next question is for you, which is, can I submit a letter of intent and a full proposal prior to the opening of either the for-profit or nonprofit corporation? If yes, can I file the corporation only once the proposal is approved?
Okay, so you want to submit in order to submit the proposal, it has to be an existing organization. So you can do that. And if later you want to establish an entity for the sole purpose of operating the engine, yeah, Yeah, I think in order to submit a full proposal, you have to be an existing organization. So you would want to make that determination in advance of submitting of the full proposal itself. And any new entity, just another point, any new entity or entity submitting proposals to NSF for the first time will have to go through some review process to demonstrate that they can manage the award and so forth. So I think that's the best answer I can give there.
Just to add to that, I think you should make sure that at the time of concept outline, you may be in process, the paperwork may be in process, but by the time you submit the full proposal, you should be officially registered, right? Either as a for-profit or non-profit entity.
Great, thank you both. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is, to what extent can city governments be a part of proposal development and the project personnel? Is that limited to specific city departments as well, or can a mayor be part of the personnel?
Yeah, it's a good question. The only specification we make is around subawards, saying that subawards need to specifically go to offices, agencies, or departments focusing on workforce, innovation, or economic development. In terms of your governance structure and figuring out who needs to be around the table to drive a nimble, creative organization that has the convening power in the regional focus, we leave that up to you. It can be core partners as a part of that governance board. It can be others. I would really make sure that you're putting people in those leadership roles and in that governance board who have the ability to make decisions and have the ability to drive change. So if that is a mayor, if that is someone like that, I think we would be open to those models, but I just want to clarify that dollars can't go directly to a mayor's office if it isn't specifically to a workforce development agency, an economic development agency, or an innovation agency within that mayor's office.
Awesome, thank you. Dimitri, next question is for you, which is, do we need to put a state or city name as a region of service? Regarding regional importance, do we need to quantify some parameters such as jobs and regional GDP? And how small can a region be?
Sure. So at the concept outline stage, there's an option. You have to put the states that your region spans, and then there's an option for you to describe that region, perhaps that's located within the state itself. Okay. So what's the second part of the question, Julia?
The second part of the question is regarding regional importance. Do we need to quantify some parameters such as jobs and regional GDP, and how small can a region be?
Yeah. So the size of a region can be as small as a metropolitan area, perhaps including the surrounding rural areas. And then as you mentioned in the question, it could be as large as a state or multiple states. So in terms of identifying the potential impact of the region, then yeah, you can use those specific metrics. If you take a look at the BAA, there is in the appendix, there's kind of a categorization of various stages of innovation ecosystems from developmental stage to mature stage. And in that appendix, we outline a number of measures folks can use to kind of identify or judge the stage of their innovation ecosystem. If they have those numbers, which many folks do, they can reference those as kind of justification to the stage of their innovation ecosystem.
Awesome, thank you. Jeffrey, I have two questions for you next, which is, there are two questions about the submission portal for the concept outlines. So one, are there specific file types that we must use if we include images in the concept outlines? And two, does the submitter need to be the PI? Can someone completely outside the Engines team submit on the behalf of the organization? For example, administrative support personnel.
The portal called Prospect for concept outline submission has as its major input a rich text box. You're able to include figures if you use the import figure function. Cutting and pasting figures does not work. They won't appear. So there are no file formats is the basic answer. You have to put in rich text into the text box. In terms of who can submit, the assumption is that the person submitting the concept outline is the PI. Unlike research.gov or Fastlane, there's no mechanism for an SRO or administrative organization within a university, for example, to submit on behalf of a PI. So the PI has to be the submitter.
Okay, great. Becky, will only the lead institutions be able to attend Proposers Day, or will partners be able to attend as well? Core partners, I should say.
Okay, good question. So we are in the process of putting together our Proposers Day, which is, I think it was Dimitri mentioned, it's a virtual event. So number of people we can have each team attend is really going to be dependent on the number of submissions received and how big we think Proposers Day is going to end up being. So we will get back to everyone with more details about Proposers Day in the future.
Okay, great. So for the next question, this is for Michal, which is, I'm involved in multiple organizations. I will be submitting a concept outline under one of them, but if given a ticket, may want to propose under another. Is that allowed, or would I be required to stay with the original organization?
Okay, I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but I think it's saying that you've only your organization has been part of one concept outline, and can you then switch if you have two affiliations? Can you then switch to your other one?
So I believe that's what the question is asking, but maybe you could address the difference between submitting as an individual and submitting as an organization.
Okay, so the being accepted, having your concept outline accepted is referring to the organization and referring to a particular topic area and region of service. So what your concept is for a type 1 or type 2. So you cannot switch then. So it's not for an individual to be accepted, it's the organization and then connected to whatever the concept is.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. So in that model, you wouldn't be able to switch to just a completely different organization that wasn't a part of this because it's based on the organization.
Can I clarify this? I think it's important to clarify this. So suppose an organization submits a concept outline, but then ultimately determines that they wouldn't be the best lead organization. That concept outline that can be used for the proposal submission, the acceptance of that concept outline could be used for the proposal submission. So the concept outline is really the ticket to being able to come to Proposers Day, but also there has to be an acceptance of a concept outline that's going to be associated with the letter of intent and proposal submission.
Okay, great. Thank you both for clarifying that. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is for the Consortium of Colleges model, which I'm assuming is referring to the webinar slides, who would be the submitting organization?
So the assumption with that first slide, which I think people are referring to, is there was a new entity already created that would house multiple institutions underneath it. So it's kind of a holding entity that works across, a research institution, a community college, several institutions. So when we say consortium, we think about that as like a standalone entity, as opposed to the consortium being 5 different organizations that are all the lead. That's how we're thinking about that. I understand how that can be confusing. We've gotten that question in the past. So to clarify, a lead organization is a single institution. It is not multiple institutions.
Okay, great. So the next question is for Becky. The question is, Becky, if I'm a submitting organization, I've clearly addressed the criteria in the BAA. Will my concept outline be accepted?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You shouldn't think of the concept outline screening process as a major down select, right? To sort of elevate the strongest ideas. It really is sort of a filtering process. We would encourage everyone who is submitting concept outlines to still make, continue their plans towards the proposal. We recognize that there's not a lot of time, particularly for those type 1s between June 30th and the end of September. And you may still be looking to develop those partnerships, et cetera. And you know, we're gonna get back to you on concept outlines being accepted or declined as soon as possible. But given the volume that we get is going to depend how quickly we can get back to you. So we would encourage everyone to continue moving forward after they submit their concept outline. It's a pretty liberal filter that we plan to use. We encourage you to really just try to address the information that's included in the BAA about the concept outlines, right? Just if you really build your concept outline around what we lay out in the BAA, you should be in good shape.
Awesome.
So,
Another,
Juliana,
yes.
May I add just to that? So I just want to make it clear to everyone that, you know, I understand that we received a number of questions around the concept outline, and you know, one organization may have the intent to submit numerous concept outlines, both type 1 and type 2, for whatever their reasons may be. But I think it's important to point out, to reiterate what Becky said, that we intend to be very gracious, I suppose, in our review of the concept outlines. We really want to understand and accept concept outlines that demonstrate that the concept outline and the team understands the nature of the Engines program and can address the basic criteria laid out for both type 1 and type 2. But we will not be making kind of judgment calls on if an organization submits 5 concept outlines that, oh, we should evaluate and tell this organization which of those 5 they should move forward with. The organization will still have the job of determining, assuming all 5 get accepted, the organization still has the job of determining which of those 5 concepts they really want to pursue. And so, assuming that they've all met the review criteria, you know, we would strongly suggest that the organization start to identify and go through the process of ideating and really focusing in on a single concept that the organization can fully support. And so, spending a lot of time, you know, dealing with, you know, multiple concept outlines before you reach the full proposal stage, you're kind of wasting a lot of time, right? So the earlier you can start, the better position we believe that the organization will be in being able to fully support a concept that is representative of not just that organization, but the region itself. And so, you know, any submitted concept outline proposals should reflect the regions, not just a single organization. And so the sooner you can start to think about it that way, the better. And so I just want to make that point clear about the concept outlines and the overall objective.
Great, thank you both. And Becky, another question on concept outlines, which is, will concept outlines for both type 1 and type 2 efforts be published or just for type 1s? And can an organization not submitting a concept outline participate in an engine after the concept outlines are made public? So 2 questions.
Both good questions. So concept outlines that get accepted for type 1 and type 2 will be published. That's a big thing that we want to get across. We want to make sure everyone who's doing type 1s are aware of who's doing type 2s and vice versa. The second question was around, so if you're an organization that has decided not to submit a concept outline, you can absolutely still participate in an engine. The only limitation there is if you haven't submitted a concept outline, you can't lead a proposal. We actually would encourage you, if you're contemplating a concept outline and you don't feel like you can really address what we lay out as expected in a concept outline, if you don't feel like you can address that, then maybe the right move for your organization is to decide not to submit the concept outline, and then once concept outlines get published, go through them, figure out who in your region is doing what, and reach out to them at that point.
Okay, great. Thank you. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is, for type 2s, by when do we need to have a CEO selected? By June 30th at the time of proposal submission? What about for type 1s?
For
Do
type two,
these, sorry, and then the next part of this is, do these answers also apply to the advisory boards that are described in the BAA?
I'll address the CEO question. Perhaps someone else on the team can address the advisory board question. So I think what we say is the CEO role is specifically for the type 2, and you need to have a CEO in place within the first 6 months of receiving the award. You could have that CEO identified prior to receiving it. You can basically say this is the person who we know we want to put in this role if we receive it. But kind of the back end date where you need to have someone in that seat is within 6 months of receiving a type 2 award. For type 1 awards, you do not have to have a CEO in place at the point of submission or even at the point of award. But since one of the goals is preparing for a type 2, if you do want to start thinking about talent at the senior levels as you gear up for a future NSF engine, that is kind of completely appropriate to do some of that work during the type 1 period and start to think about what leadership could look like once you do get to the next stage of development. So I'll turn it to others if they have any answer on the governance and advisory board question.
Yeah, so the advisory board should be formed after the award is made, not before. I think the VA provides instruction that the proposal can actually include plans to establish an advisory board, but not to contact individuals prior to receiving the award. And so establishing an advisory board should occur within the 6 months after the award. The governance board itself is made up of representatives who are part of the leadership, part of the team, the lead and the core partners. So you can establish your governance board at any point that you choose. But the advisory board is something that's established after the award is made, and you can find the details on that in the BAA.
Great, thank you both. Jeffrey, the next question is also around kind of team members, and it's about the team members listed in the concept outline. A maximum of 5 key members must be specified for a type 1 concept outline as specified in the BAA. What is the minimum number of key members that must be specified for a type 1 concept outline? What if I have more than 5 key members involved?
There's no requirement for the number. There's only a limit on how many you can list in the concept outline. So if you had 10 key members for the concept outline for type 1, which is a 2-page document, you would want to select the 5 most important ones. But you shouldn't worry that this is somehow going to negatively impact the chances of the concept outline being approved.
Juliana, let me correct one statement I made.
Sure.
So I said that you can establish the government boards anytime you want. It's not really anytime you want. I mean, if you're going to write a strong proposal and so forth, you would have membership, you have agreements in place and all these things and the governance of your engine, perhaps if you are a type 2. And so your governance board is what helps define that structure. So it's not anytime you want, but you can do it prior to actually submitting a proposal. Advisory board definitely comes after the award is made. So I just want to clarify, it's not like anytime you want, 2 years after the award is made.
Thank you for that clarification. Michal, the next question is for you, which is, if a region has 7 different concept outlines from different entities, will that make the concept outlines for that region look weaker? I guess in the eyes of NSF.
Okay, so this builds on what Dimitri and Becky were speaking about earlier, but I'll reiterate here that for this concept outline stage, we are looking for kind of a minimum threshold. Does the concept meet the criteria that we're looking for in the BAA? We're not going to be doing a down select. So a region can be part of multiple concept outlines. It's not going to look stronger or weaker. You might just be throwing out those ideas so that you can see what other regions are interested in, or maybe your region is having trouble deciding what they want to focus on. The point is that soon after these come out, as we've been emphasizing, you will, if you do have multiple, you'll want to start consolidating and figure out what to focus on, because from the proposal stage, it will look weaker if you have multiple and you're kind of splitting your expertise and your strengths.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jeffrey, the next question is for you, which is how much information would you like for June 30th? I assume that means the concept outline deadline regarding our coalition members and or potential coalition members for a type 1 concept outline.
Well, if you know who your coalition members are, it'd probably be helpful to point out those that have agreed to serve as coalition members. If it's really just speculative, like we'd like to reach out to the following kinds of organizations, that really doesn't say as much. Keep in mind, it's only a 2-page document. So there are some specific things in the BAA you should address. And so use your space judiciously.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Dimitri, the next question is for you, which is, you mentioned something interesting in the Mythbusters section, that an applicant can go from a type 2 to a type 1. How do you envision going from a type 2 to a type 1? Do we self-request after submitting the concept outline, or will NSF provide feedback and recommend that we are better suited for a type 1?
Yeah, so at the concept outline stage, if you were to decide to submit type 2 concept outline and you received approval, but subsequent, prior to submitting full proposal, there were some events that led you to decide, no, we're not really ready for type 1. Perhaps you were expecting, funding from state or local government that would help drive your pursuit of a type 2. But maybe that funding doesn't come through, so you want to revert back to the type 1. Under those instances, we would say, so that will be a reason why one would go from a type 2 to a type 1, because they didn't receive the necessary funding or the necessary support. So that's generally the expectation, Juliana.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the types of cases. And so we really do want teams to evaluate their region of service and its current innovation ecosystem. But we understand that there are a number of moving parts, and there, just as NSF is aiming to accelerate innovation, there are states who are aiming to invest funds and companies positioning themselves. And so an organization may not have all of the information at the submission of the concept outline stage, although they may be expecting to receive that at a later date prior to submitting a full proposal. And so we're attempting to be as flexible as possible. And so given that a group will have submitted a great deal of information, more information than a type 1, we could still make a decision on allowing them to move to a type 1, but we can't go the other way. And so that's generally the type of thing we would be considering if someone wanted to move from a type 2 to a type 1.
Okay, great, thank you.
Dimitri, sorry, can I?
Go ahead, Becky.
I wonder, is there anything that a team who is doing that has to do other than, so they've submitted their type 2 concept outline, it gets approved, then they decide to submit a type 1, so they just go ahead and submit a type 1, or do they have to inform us in advance of that?
So most teams, so teams would certainly want to speak with a program officer about their why they're doing what they're doing and that they plan to do so. So yes, so the teams, if you're going to do that, then yes, you should interact with the Engines program team to discuss your rationale. Thanks, Becky.
Awesome, thank you both. So Daniel, the next question is for you, and it is about the roadshows and sharing names and emails. So this person was at the roadshow that included Mid-Atlantic states and received the attendee names and emails because they opted in, and they're wondering if they can get this information for the other 4 regional roadshows.
No, they can't, unfortunately. The way we structured the opt-in was you're only opted in to share contact information with other people who attended that event. It isn't kind of everyone who has expressed interest in the NSF engines, you'll get their contact information because you opted in. unfortunately. So we're just sharing for people who are at the same event, perhaps cross paths in a breakout room. However, when we publish the concept outlines, there might be opportunities to reach out to others who have submitted as well. So while they might not be every attendee who attended, one of the roadshows, we hope to facilitate opportunities for people to continue discussions with others who are building engines, thinking about building engines, and submitting concept outlines.
Great, thank you. Diaga, the next question is for you, which is, what is the definition of a nonprofit that the NSF Engines program is using?
Right, so I think there are multiple questions around, 501c3s, C4s, 501c6, and so on. We want everyone to see the BAA carefully. The BAA points to the NSF proposal and awards procedures and policies guide, the PAPPG, where it is defined as nonprofits that are eligible to submit are nonprofit independent museums, observatories, research labs, professional societies, and similar organizations located in the US that are directly associated with educational or research activities. So this is what we define as a nonprofit. So if your nonprofit is defined with that scope, then yes, you should be eligible to submit. And if you're not associated with that scope, educational or research activities, then your eligibility will be questioned by NSF when you submit.
Okay, great, thank you. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is a regional ecosystem focused specifically on space, research, technology, and business development a desirable offering for this program?
So we won't comment on specific topic areas. What I would say is if it addresses the pillars that we've put forward, use-inspired research, translation, economic growth, and workforce development, then it could be within scope. We don't have kind of specific verticals or tracks. So while I can't comment specifically on if that topic area would be relevant, I would say take a look at the BAA, and if it fits within the criteria, then absolutely go forward and submit.
Great, thank you. Becky, the next question is for you. The question is, I am part of a TCU coalition and not ready to lead a concept outline for this round. Does NSF in the future plan on doing other regional engines, another regional engine like this one? Is it part of the NSF strategic plan to do something like this in the future, 5 or 10 years, at the time when we as TCUs will be ready to lead on such initiatives?
So we do plan to have, other funding opportunities for this program in the future, assuming funding is available. However, the current plan is that in this year one, we'll have type 1 and type 2s, and then in future out years, there would only be type 2 proposals being a call for type 2 proposals. So if you're interested in that type 1 proposal, we would strongly encourage you to think about submitting a concept outline for that type 1 and thinking about ways to scale enough so that you could receive that planning grant funding to help build your capacity for a future type 2 proposal.
Okay, great, thank you. Dimitri, the next question is for you, which is, what are some examples of things that would cause a concept outline to not be accepted and therefore not invited to Proposers Day or able to submit an LOI and full proposal?
Yeah, so good question. So generally, just not being adequately responsive to the criteria listed in the BAA. So, for example, the region of service is very important. And so if a team doesn't list an explicit region of service, then that will obviously be cause for declining the concept outline. If we see concept outlines, for example, that focus on maybe I'm a startup and I want to focus on a specific product. A single product wouldn't lay the groundwork for catalyze an innovation ecosystem, a regional innovation ecosystem. So that wouldn't really be appropriate. If I if we were to see concept outlines, for example, that focus strictly on, fundamental research, then that really isn't responsive to the BAA. And so it's really about being responsive to the BAA and addressing the review criteria that are clearly laid out in the BAA.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Thiago, which is, Thiago, when do you expect to know about the Type 2 LOI and full proposal submission dates?
I think we are looking to see the level of interest from the communities around the Type 1s and Type 2s. One of the measures that we are using to determine when to post the Type 2 deadlines is to look at the range of institutions and the level of interest and the topics that are needed so that NSF can provide adequate support to potential proposers, given the complexity of the Type 2 process. Once we will know more, and we'll have to make a decision as soon as we get the sense of how many Type 2 proposals submissions are being thought of by the community in terms of the concept outline submission. So if you are thinking about that you are eligible for a Type 2, you are ready to apply, we would encourage you to definitely submit a concept outline so we can use that to better guide our timelines.
Great, thank you. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is, I attended, one of the roadshows 4 or 5, and I opted in to sharing my contact information, but I have yet to receive an email.
Yes.
Is there a reason for this, or should I be still waiting for an email?
So we had some issues with email sending. We resent all the emails to people who opted in for Roadshow 4 and 5. So check your inbox. You should have gotten that late in the day yesterday or early today. We were just kind of overwhelmed with the amount of interest. We had several more 100 people RSVP than we've had for the earlier roadshows. So it was just a bigger lift to get everything out the door. But we resent them again today. So if you missed it last time, check again. It should be in your inbox from the NSF Engines email account, either yesterday or today, if you attended one of those events and opted in.
Awesome, thank you. And on the note of our outreach events, we've also had a question that said, could you possibly give us an approximate idea of the attendance of this Q&A? So we've had over 300 participants at this Q&A as well as the Q&A prior to this. So the next question is for Jeffrey, which is, what qualifications would you like to see for the PI for a Type 1 concept or a Type 1 proposal?
For the proposal or for the concept outline? For the proposal, the expectation is
Let's maybe address both.
For the concept outline, there's nothing in there about qualifications. As with any NSF proposal, you'd like to see that the PI submitting is qualified to, as you know, for Type 2 needs a CEO, Type 1 doesn't need a CEO, so there's some expectation in a sense that the PI for a Type 1 proposal will be able to lead the initiative. But there's no requirement on particular qualifications. For example, it doesn't require that you're a university faculty member or that you have a PhD or anything like that, but a suitable background and experience would be appropriate.
Okay. And for the PI for a Type 1, are you imagining that this PI would then become the CEO as if they were to move on to a Type 2, or can you address kind of the difference there?
They're separate. So our expectation, our reason for funding Type 1 proposals is to lead to a set of strong Type 2 proposals. And so you should think of the Type 1 as that development award to help build the team and build the concept and put together the partnerships necessary to put together a strong Type 2 proposal. But then our expectation is that there'll be an opportunity to write a Type 2 proposal. So there's really no connection other than providing the funding to let these teams build enough necessary infrastructure and partnerships to create a strong proposal.
Okay, great. And while we're on the topic,
Juliana, may I just add just a little bit to so I think it's important to point out that, as Jeffrey mentioned, that so NSF doesn't specify qualifications per se for Type 1 PI, but in practice, I mean, if I'm a team and I'm wondering who should lead the type 1 proposal, understand what the objectives of the type 1 are, right? You're trying to build up so you can eventually establish a type 2, which you then may hire a CEO to operate and manage. But the person who is leading the type 1 effort, has to be able to bring folks together, has to be able to convene and interact with the various stakeholders. And so in practice, you want the individual to have, those type of skills and ability to bring together stakeholders from the university, from the region itself, because you're building a type 1 proposal that hopefully you can turn into a type 2 over a certain period of time. And so if I'm a team, that's what I should be thinking about. How can we build around this and develop get the right individuals to actually lead this effort?
Great, thank you. And so on the note of CEOs, now moving on to thinking about type 2 proposals. Does the PI need to be the CEO for a type 2 proposal?
Does the PI, so the person that's submitting the proposal, that's what we're calling the PI or the project director. That's what we're calling this person.
Mm-hmm.
So no, so that could be, the VPR, for example, could be the person submitting the proposal, or a faculty member could be submitting the proposal, and then the engine has to hire a CEO within 6 months. All right, so that could be a new person, or that could be the submitter. So, but it's not required. If I'm understanding your question correctly, Juliana, the PI, meaning the person that's submitting the proposal, does not have to be the eventual CEO. But NSF is not saying that it cannot be that person, but it doesn't have to be that person.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Can I just add one more general thing kind of about CEO leadership? And Dimitri said some of these points, but I just want to reinforce them. The person who is the PI, the project director, the CEO, is someone who should be ready to lead on day one. Someone who can pull together that region, can pull together that coalition, and can start getting things done. Because even if it takes a couple months to get that CEO in place or something like that, you don't want to lose that time, in that process. Whoever it is who's going to be the PI is someone who is going to be comfortable speaking to government, comfortable speaking with universities, comfortable coalition building, even perhaps fundraising for this effort. So just kind of think really intentionally about the skill sets that both the CEO and the person who might be leading that in interim, if they're not going to do CEO, needs to hold when you're putting together what your leadership team looks like and what your PI leader looks like.
Great.
Okay, great. Dimitri, is it possible to have a university-based type 1 application with the idea that a startup will form within the 2 years and become the primary engine for a type 2 application?
I'm sorry, Juliana, can you repeat that question for me? I'm sorry.
Sure. Is it possible to have a university-based type 1 application with the idea that a startup will form within the 2 years during the type 1 and then become the primary engine for the type 2 application?
Oh yeah, sure. So yes, the university could lead the type 1 and then perhaps form another entity. It has to be a legal entity recognized by federal laws during the type 1, and then that entity would then submit the proposal to NSF as a type 2. That would be okay. The entity has to be formed and recognized prior to the submission of the type 2 proposal. Correct.
Okay, great. Jeffrey, this is about concept outlines again, which is if a concept outline has several institutions and is submitted by University A, can an LOI be submitted by University B? And let me add a part to this question that maybe will help make this distinction. Let's address it if University B is on the concept outline and if University B is not on the concept outline.
Either way, if the concept outline is submitted and approved, the organization that submitted the concept outline could decide that it would be better as a partner rather than the lead on a proposal. And the lead on that proposal could be another organization completely. The email that you'll get and when we accept the concept outline is the thing that must be submitted with the proposal. And as Dimitri stated, if it's really going to be a significant change, like the organization that's going to be the lead was never mentioned, it would be good to discuss that with NSF so that we understand what's going on.
Great, thank you. Becky, the next question is for you, which is, if others in our region are expecting to submit a type 2 proposal, and for the sake of argument, let's say it's likely to be successful, does that practically preclude us from submitting a type 1 proposal for a different focus area, given the intention is to fund regions that are historically overlooked?
Okay, so that's a good question. And I want to make sure I answer the question that was asked. So practically, so first of all, I don't know that you want to make the assumption that a type 2 is going to get funded. And that's up for every team to decide for themselves. It is likely that we won't have multiple type 2 proposals funded within the same region. One of the things I'm grappling with here is in the question where it mentions preclude us from submitting a type 1 proposal for a different focus area given the intention to fund regions that are historically overlooked. So we're making the assumption that the region is historically overlooked, but there is a team that is well positioned for a type 2. So if we kind of ignore that piece of it for now, and you're in a different focus area, I think you can certainly consider submitting that type 1 proposal. If the type 2 does get funded, maybe that's something that you're going to want to consider moving forward, because now your path to a type 2 is going to look, there may be some larger barriers there, right? So maybe you want to start thinking about how you could engage with that type 2 awardee. And then I just want to get back to the phrase of that question, regions that are historically overlooked. I don't think that regions that are historically overlooked is a reason to fund, more awards necessarily. But we are certainly looking to those regions for strong proposals. And again, I would go back to whether or not how confident you are that a type 2 is going to be funded, right? Because the concern is if you kind of bank on that type 2 getting funded so you don't pursue a type 1, and for whatever reason, through the merit review process, you don't, that type 2 doesn't get funded, where does that leave your region? And does anyone else want to jump in on that question? I don't know if I did it justice there.
I think you did, Becky. So thank you. I'm going to ask the next question of Dimitri and Michal, which is, can you clarify a bit about the difference or similarity between PIs, project directors, and CEOs, as we refer to them in the Engines BAA? And I'll hand this first to Dimitri, and then Michal, if you want to build on anything he says.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I understand there may be some confusion there. So in the BAA, when we use the term project director, we use the term CEO, and those are the same, right? So we use those interchangeably. They are the same. I know traditionally NSF uses the term PI, and perhaps to NSF folks and traditional folks, traditional proposers to NSF universities, we use the term primary investigator, and so you may see primary investigator use PI/PD when you submit your concept outline. But essentially, we're using all three interchangeably here. So PI it would be the person who is submitting the proposal, would be the person who is in charge of the actual proposal itself and submitting to NSF. And so we use all of those interchangeably. The distinction that we're attempting to make here is that the person submitting the proposal, which we are on the form, you may see, principal investigator, doesn't have to be the same as the CEO if an award is made. And so that's really the distinction that we're trying to make, is that someone that's employed at the institution, in this case, university, can submit the proposal, and then within 6 months, you should name a full-time CEO, which could very well be the PI that actually submitted the proposal. And so that's the only distinction that we are attempting to make here. There is no traditional PI in the sense of this is the primary investigator of a research program. So I just wanted to be clear there. And I'll let Mihal, you can address anything I missed there.
No, I think that clarifies it now.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thiago, the next question is for you, which is this program funded in the FY23 NSF budget request, or are there positive signals for continued funding from Congress and the White House?
The funding for this program is part of the NSF FY23 budget request. And again, we are hopeful that Congress has shown a lot of interest in the program, and we are expecting that support will continue in the appropriations that we receive.
Great, thank you. Mihal, the next question is for you, which is, what are your expectations for the translation of R&D into practice? Does the scope of R&D have to be constrained to focus on tractable industry problems?
Right, so this is a good question. So this goes to part of why we're funding the engines as 10 years. So you can imagine that at the beginning of an engine, there would be pieces for the translation to practice for that R&D piece, for the use inspired for the workforce. I'm actually expanding beyond that would be ready to work on immediately. And then there would be pieces that would be more forward looking. So it's really kind of the whole range. And the idea is that new ideas are generated and new startups are created and translated as it progresses. So it's really sort of that whole range.
Okay, great. Thank you. Daniel, the next question is for you, which is regarding the leadership of the use-inspired R&D, workforce development, and technology transfer/commercialization pieces. Does it require that organizations from different sectors lead each of these three components of an NSF engine? Or is the core/lead institution able to lead more than one of these components for a given engine?
I think that's up to the region, to be completely honest. Whatever is going to lead to the end goals of the engine, which is driving economic growth, developing breakthrough technologies, and translating things from lab to market. So if there's an institution within that region that is capable of doing multiple things, or if there's a new entity that's created that is capable and nimble enough to do multiple things and has that culture of innovation that we talk a lot about, fantastic. They can tackle multiple things. But we also don't expect someone to be able to do everything. There are some things that institutions are better at, and bringing them into the fold and partnering with them is really important. So I don't think we're going to put our finger on the scale saying, it needs to be one institution for each silo, or, one institution can lead across every silo, or whatever the model is. Like, one of the reasons we built this in such a flexible model is so that you could build something that is capable of driving the ambitious and nimble change that we want to see of an NSF engine.
Awesome. And Daniel, to build on that, can you also address, can engines be operated as business enterprises?
A for-profit is eligible to lead an NSF engine as well, as long as they're able to fulfill all of the missions outlined in our BAA. I mean, if the question is, are they able to receive revenue or license dollars or other things like that, I think we put some specific language in the BAA about how they can think about their culture of sustainability long-term. And if it's a more detailed question, perhaps it's something that can be answered at engines@nsf.gov, or something that would be hammered out during the contract negotiation stage. But at kind of a very high level, a for-profit entity is eligible to lead an NSF engine.
Okay, great. And I just want to note that we are also trying to answer questions in the chat. So please stay on as we work our way through the chat and try to answer questions in the chat as well. And yes, Dimitri, if you would like to follow up about the PI distinction here.
Yeah, so just quickly, I received a follow-up question, and this the general idea is that if my university is putting forth a concept outline related to innovation and AI, and our research lab is the lead in this area, why wouldn't that faculty member be listed as a PI on the Engines proposal? And so I just wanted to answer that publicly so everybody could hear it. So it's not that we're saying that the faculty member cannot be listed as a PI. He or she very well could, but just note that the PI's role there is not just about driving the research component related to AI. The PI, project director / CEO's role is to manage and operate the engine, which includes R&D, workforce development, and all the other activities, translation of practice, all the other activities involved in operating the engine. And so that's the distinction that we're making here, is that when you're deciding who should be the CEO of the engine, it should be an individual that can handle all of those responsibilities and leading the overall team. And so it may very well be the case that you have other individuals within the engine's leadership that may be focused on, scientific expertise or technology translation or workforce development. May have individuals within the engine's leadership team that address certain or responsible for certain aspects of the engine itself. So I just wanted to make it clear that we're not saying that faculty members cannot be the lead. We're just trying to make a distinction between what we mean by the CEO, project director, and the PI of an engine versus a PI of a traditional NSF research project, and the types of individuals you may want to look at as leaders of the engine. So I just wanted to clarify that because I received a question outside of the channel regarding it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Becky, the next question is for you, which is, can an engine be designed to redistribute NSF funds through a selective process where the engine manages active customer discovery to drive problem statements to be solved and then manages the screening of potential solution development?
Okay, so that sounds kind of like an I-Corps type of model with, in I-Corps be sort of mini grants or micro grants to go out for customer discovery. So that is something you could do as an engine. I just want to, remind everyone that would not be the only function of an engine, right? That customer discovery around commercialization is, going to be tied to that translation to practice piece. But we would expect an engine to also be working on the workforce development piece as well as the R&D.
Awesome, thank you. Michal, to what extent should we focus the concept outlines on technical elements / technologies that we are proposing to focus on versus the stakeholders / assets within the region we're focusing on and the composition of industry clusters therein?
Okay, so the short answer is should focus on all those pieces. And what you should really do is we want to direct you to the concept outline, to the review criteria in the BAA. So you can see in there what we're going to be reviewing based on for the type 1 and then the additional pieces for type 2. We will be considering all 2 and then all 5 of those criteria. And so the technology is a piece of that. And those other parts that are listed are another piece of that. And there's additional parts. So it's the purpose and vision, the regional importance and impact, the partnerships, workforce development and related initiative. That's what's listed there. There's more details in the BAA.
Great. So Becky, the next question is for you, which is, even though $160 million is a large sum of money, we believe that it would be extraordinarily difficult for an economically hampered region to bootstrap itself from scratch, and that an existing innovation hub in a region can much more effectively revitalize neighboring communities and counties that have been left behind for too long. Would NSF Engines be receptive to this notion?
Okay, so I'm going to take a stab at this, and absolutely, Michal, jump in if you want to add to this. But the way I'm reading this question, I'm thinking that, so if you have an innovation hub with assets in the region, they should absolutely be leveraged in order to grow an innovation ecosystem in the region that would help to revitalize those neighboring communities. I don't know if I'm missing some nuance there, but if you have that strength in your region, then I would say yes, you should leverage that innovation hub. Michal, do you?
Yeah, so I think maybe part of that question also is, would that be seen as significantly catalyzing a new region for their economic growth if there's already something that exists there? So I think that if that's part of the question, then I would say that that's up to the team to make that case. That could be the case. And so we can't really answer that kind of as a blanket statement. And that would be one case where maybe there are existing assets there and an existing kind of starting place for an innovation ecosystem, which is what would be needed for a type 2. And in this case, it would be saying that there's a reason how that region would be growing what they have in that place and how it would be providing something new. So you could make that case. You could make other cases.
Can I add to the answer? I get the sense, but maybe this is incorrect, that the idea of the question is, could they just use the money to fund an existing organization? But keep in mind, there are more parts to this than is likely to be currently done by an existing organization. We're looking for three things: use-inspired research, translation of research to practice, and workforce development, working together to solve a problem of regional and societal importance. So if that organization already exists, which maybe it does, then this could be used to augment that. But my guess is that's not what the question really intended.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all. Tiago, the next question is for you, which is, can only the lead submitter attend Proposers Day on August 1st, or is it open to all partners?
Right. I think this is a great question. We have gotten a lot of questions along this nature about what the Proposers Day going to look like and who will be invited. Our intent is to provide as much of a robust opportunity for people to learn more about the program and learn about other potential proposers who concept outlines have been approved. That said, we are planning this to be a virtual event. It is not going to be in person, and we are also thinking about how best can we arrange the event to be of benefit to all participants. So obviously, the depends on the scale, the number of people we can admit. We are looking to see what volume of proposals we get, and we will be making a decision on how many people per team would be allowed to come to the event. Again, it's purely a logistical concern. It's not nothing to do with our willingness to have more people in there. It is something that we were looking forward to deciding once we have the idea of how many concept outlines have been submitted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jeffrey, the next questions, there's going to be a couple that are for you. The first one is, can you comment on the appropriate balance between research content and workforce development? I assume in a full proposal. For type 1s, how much of the budget should be allocated to research and how much to evaluation, since there's bigger emphasis on these two in a type 2 proposal?
Well, keep in mind, first of all, the purpose of a type 1. It's a development award intended to help build the team, bring together the partners, lay the foundation for a type 2 award. The FAQ addresses the budgets a little bit, and among other things it says is there really shouldn't be any of the type 1 budget used for research as such. It's not intended to do preliminary research. It's intended to build the team. What is the balance? I find it, I'm not quite clear on the balance between research and evaluation. Remember, the three pillars of this are research, R&D, research, use and translation to practice, and workforce development. So if you're asking what's the balance between those three, those are equally important. For type 1, it would be to develop the capacity to do those three things. For type 2, it would be to deliver those three things.
Okay, great. So the next question, also around the concept outlines, is when defining a geographic region of service, how specific does the description need to be? For example, can we state that it will include all of one state plus neighboring communities in these additional states, or should we list all community names?
I'm assuming this is about concept outlines.
Yes.
In that case, we want to have a reasonable idea from reading the concept outline about what the region of service is. So however you can define it appropriately, you know, it might be the low country in South Carolina. That's probably sufficient. But if you're starting to piece together a lot of things that are not connected by some sort of standard understood definition, then you probably want to be a little bit more specific about what you mean by that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And last one coming to you in a row, which is, this is a question that says, there are multiple concept outlines being submitted from my university. Our concern here is that the Office of Sponsored Projects will be more prone to choose another topic that isn't ours. We're already thinking of partners that we've developed outside of our university who could take over as a lead. Do you have any comments on this approach?
As I understand the question, you're submitting a concept outline, but you feel like in the end, the lead may be some other organization. You can do that. You can choose another organization to take the lead on the concept outline. If you're asking about your SRO, we can't get into those politics of how SROs are going to decide which of the concept outlines they allow to go to full proposal.
Great, thank you. Daniel, this question is, do we need to have all of the partners from the concept outline on the LOI? Can the list of partners change, grow, shrink, or modify between concept outline and LOI?
Yes, it's okay for them to change and shift over time as you identify new opportunities, as you realize partners need to grow in the scope of their role or change their scope of their role. We allow for that flexibility between the concept outline and the proposal or the LOI stage. Great.
So another one for Jeffrey, and Jeffrey, you have two more coming about concept outlines. The first one, actually, sorry, is not about concept outlines. It is, can a proposal focused on an area with a nascent innovation ecosystem be led by an institution in a nearby area with a thriving ecosystem if there are core partners from the area within the nascent ecosystem and the plan involves transfer of knowledge via the partnerships? And I think Dimitri and Michal touched on this earlier. If you could kind of touch and expand upon this, and if anyone else on the team would like to jump in, please do.
The lead organization has to be in the region of service. However that's defined. That's the starting point. There can be partners outside of the region of service. So in this case, as I'm reading this, it says a proposal focused on an area with a nascent innovation ecosystem, meaning that in some senses the region of service. Can it be led by a nearby institution that's outside? The answer is that cannot be led by that institution. That institution can be a partner, an important partner, but just a partner.
Great, thank you. And because I know people are looking at the concept outline portal right now, and that is why we're getting questions on specific things like embedding images. Jeffrey, does the portal submission allow hyperlinks to be included in the narrative? Does NSF prefer that or discourage it?
They won't be read. I can tell you that. You're going to have to put in text that you expect to be reviewed and read. You can't extend the concept outline through the use of hyperlinks to other documents that you would like to be read by the review team.
Okay, great. Daniel, this question's for you. It is, I'm at a small for-profit company. How do we find and connect with others who are building an engine to learn and understand if there's a mutual fit?
One, if you attended a roadshow, hopefully you met some really interesting people working on different problems, and there might be opportunities for partnership. Two, we are going to publish concept outlines, and there will be opportunities for you to reach out to submitters of concept outlines to offer how you could basically provide partnership, provide value to what they are building. So our goal is for there to be multiple points in this process where you as a smaller organization can basically make a case for why other organizations in your region or in your topic area could team up with you and put together an even stronger application.
Great, thank you. Becky, do I understand correctly that a phase 2, so I'm assuming that means type 2, engine applicant is not allowed to include a non-contiguous native nation / serving institution?
Okay, so so as we've said that it is up to you to define your region of service, right? And because we're looking to grow regional innovation ecosystems, we are generally thinking about these regions as being geographically contiguous. That does not mean there are not some good reasons to define a region of service that may include something or a region or a part of the country that is not contiguous with the rest of the region of service, but is still defined as part of the region of service. So I don't want to just say that you are correct. You're not allowed to include that. That would be an untrue statement. I would just encourage you to make sure that there is a genuine incorporation of that native nation or institution as a part of the region. And I guess what I mean by that is, whatever the need is that the engine is addressing, that it makes sense not only for the rest of the region, but also for that non-contiguous piece, that it meets a need there as well, and that the region isn't sort of attaching, let's say, a tribal nation so that they can make an argument that they're being inclusive, for example, right? It has to be a genuine region of service that's meeting a need, even if part of it is non-contiguous.
Okay, great, thank you. Jeffrey, I'm going to pose this question to you. I think we have answered, everyone on this panel has answered it, but we're just going to have you answer it again for the sake of clarity, which is, if an organization is not part of the concept outline, can they be the lead institution in an LOI and full proposal?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, if they are not part of a concept outline, they can be the lead institution on an LOI and full proposal?
Yes, they can be.
Okay. They can be, okay.
But it has to relate to the concept outline that was approved.
Okay, thank you. Michal, is an engine meant to support new science research or more focused on bringing ideas already there through the commercialization process?
Okay, so I answered this in part before, but I'll re-emphasize this. So the reason why we're calling these engines is because we have the idea that there should be a continuous process of coming up with new ideas and driving innovation and driving the economy of the region, both during the award period and beyond. So in order to do that, we would expect that new ideas would need to come up in addition to ideas that are ready for commercialization now. And again, it would be that whole range is what would be needed. And that's why we have the use-inspired research as one of those 3 core pillars of the main activities that an engine would be carrying out.
Great, thank you. Thiaga, has NSF had any discussion with DOE to clarify how engines might be able to interact with DOE national labs? The engines can include the stakeholders, private companies, and DOE labs might have some concerns about being perceived as working to benefit for-profit companies.
It's a great question, and I would say that NSF is in the process of discussing potential partnerships with other agencies, mission agencies, DOE, NIH, and others on how to collaborate with them on this program. At this time, we don't have anything specific to highlight, and we would encourage partners, potential proposers, to seek out entities funded by these agencies. If you want to include any assets that they bring to the table, as part of the proposal. We encourage that. I don't think you need to worry about IP concerns, directly into the way that as if like DOE is going to behave a certain way. I think concerns are something that proposals should have with all partners and make it clear and do this in a transparent fashion. I would want all of you to know that please don't make any assumptions on how IP arrangements are going to be. Make sure that you have those conversations with partners ahead of time and start having that information. Ready while you as you think about adding a partner to the team.
Great, thank you. Michal, the next question is for you, which is NSF looking for an engine to be focused on multiple industries? Oh, sorry, is NSF looking for the engines program to be focused on multiple industries, or is NSF looking for the engines program to focus on one industry?
The program, are you sure it was the program and not a particular engine?
So the question says engines in plural, so I assume it's the program, but maybe if you could address it for both and make that distinction.
So the program, I think as people are aware, is accepting in any topic area that the teams that are proposing make a case for it being of national and societal significance, but of regional importance and driven by the regional economy. So clearly many different industries. For a particular engine, it could be one or it could be multiple, but there's a distinction between advancing, let's say, one critical technology and trying to come up with all the use cases for that critical technology, which could have been one approach that we could have taken, but we didn't take that approach. And instead, this is driven by a topic area that's, again, what I said, that national and societal significance. So whether it's one or more industries, that's dependent on the topic.
Okay, great. And will NSF be looking to diversify the industry focus across the different regions? And this question actually says 5 regions. So if you could address the idea of, of regionality as it's written in the BAA, that would be great. Sorry, this is meant for Michal as a follow-up, but if anyone else would like to answer, that is welcome as well.
Maybe somebody else wants to go first.
Sure. I will re-ask the question, which is, I think Michal touched on, kind of the spread of different topic areas in funding of different engines, and that the program itself is not focused on one topic area, but a specific engine would be. If it is kind of like a one topic area per engine focus, is there an attempt to diversify that across the country? And this question specifically says across the 5 regions. So I want to make sure we address the 5 regions question.
There are no 5 regions. Let's start with that. There are no 5 regions.
I can also add that we are anticipating up to 5 Type 2 awards, which is perhaps where this notion of 5 regions might have come up from. And everyone should be cognizant that we are looking at up to 5 Type 2 awards in this round of the BAA. We have made it clear in the FAQs and previous Q&A sessions that we will be having a round of the BAA of this program where we will be announcing additional Type 2 awards especially for those who are getting the Type 1s now. So yes, we'll be looking to diversify the industry focus and also the regional representations as much as we can across the country, but it is not limited to 5.
Can I just say one thing on that front as well? It is possible both in the Type 1s and the Type 2 pools that will have different regions that are proposing topic areas that are aligned or in a similar broader topic area. And it is very possible that we might make multiple awards in a similar topic area in different regions across the country. And there could be co-learning from those awardees, and there could be opportunities for collaboration, even working together with the same set of funders. So don't think just because there's some other region in the country that submits a concept outline in a similar topic to what you're proposing, it means you need to throw that out the window and start from scratch. We are open to having teams in different regions of the country working on aligned topic areas.
Okay, great. And Becky, you're going to close us out with the last 2 questions. The The first one is a question I think we'd be very excited about, which is, how can someone sign up to be a reviewer?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't think we have a specific mechanism, so I'm going to say email the engines@nsf.gov.
Yep.
Requesting that, unless we have something that I'm unaware of for them to sign up via. But I would remind everyone that, you know, you're only going to be eligible to be a reviewer if your organization isn't planning to submit a proposal. Does anyone else on the team want to jump in? Did I miss something about how? Okay, so I'm going to.
Is the right way to respond if you want to become a reviewer.
Yep. Okay. So email the engines unless we come up with something else.
Great. And the last question is, if multiple organizations in a region submit concept outlines, but on very different topic areas, and their concept outlines are approved, how should the region best proceed? In other words, are these organizations on Proposers Day expected or encouraged to collaborate to create fewer or one stronger regional proposal? If so, this might mean that the original topic area may need to be revised a bit to accommodate regional strengths of these new partners. Is this allowed?
Yes. So I would say I wouldn't necessarily wait until Proposers Day, but the reality is that we would expect that once a bunch of type 1s in a given region are submitted, that is an opportunity for all of the organizations and individuals that that submitted a concept outline to take a beat and reassess where they are and how the region wants to move forward. And that's going to look different across the country in different regions. We certainly encourage the teams to kind of rethink, in some cases, maybe rethink what the topic area may be or what exactly the region is going to look like. But absolutely, we would expect to see some shuffling and reshuffling of teams after the concept outlines. But like I said, I wouldn't necessarily wait until Proposers Day. Recognize that we're expecting a large audience on Proposers Day in a virtual setting. So as much teaming and just communicating that you can do within your region on day one, the better.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to hand it off to Thiago to close us out on this Q&A session.
Yes, and again, I'm glad that we have over 250 participants who are still present and listening. Thank you for that, and we hope that we are answering all of your questions to your satisfaction. There are a bunch of questions that are still open in the chat. We're going to try to answer them in the next few minutes or so if you want to stay on for a little bit longer. And I would also say that if you don't find your questions answered right now or you require further clarifications, please email engines@nsf.gov. That's the best way to get a response as quickly as possible. We have been opening up lots of office hours, and as one might expect, there's a lot of interest in the program, and all those office hours are getting booked fairly quickly. We will try to add as much as we can, but I think NSF will be best positioned to respond to you if you can provide some additional details in email to engines@nsf.gov. With that, again, I want to remind everyone that concept outlines are due soon, and we thank you for your interest, and we are looking forward to giving you a lot more information. Once we get the concept outlines in, we review them and we publish the concept outlines that are approved. We are looking forward to the next phase of the program kicking in, and we'll provide a lot more guidance at that stage. So thank you again for your participation, and we appreciate your interest in the program. Have a good evening.